Hey everyone. Hey. Did you enjoy the previous panel? It was really good. The VCs are amazing, right? And it's me here again to say welcome to this panel about SDRs in part of the Revenue Excellence Festival. And today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. If you know the words already, you can talk along the words with me. So for those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. That's why we have these amazing panelists here to help you. And if you're not a member yet, you're missing out, but you will be soon. We have some amazing sponsors. And they're all here in this slide. And to learn more about these innovative companies, click on the sponsors booth tab at the top of this event page. And while you're there, you can also check the full agenda for the 3-day event. We had 26 panels. You missed some today. You will get the recording later, but we have more panels today. We have panels tomorrow and the day after. So we'll go ahead there and check the agenda. We have more than 50 speakers, a lot of people for you to learn from. But let's focus on this in this session right now. I'm gonna do some housekeeping notes, and then we're gonna start the discussion. And please, audience, you know we have our moderator Andrew later, and then he will introduce himself and the panelists, and then we're gonna start the discussion. And please, audience, you know we have some time for questions and answers. So send your questions using the chat or the Q&A function right there in the right hand side in your panel, and we will make sure to answer all of them. So housekeeping notes. Use GoCast. GoCast is an amazing platform. You can do a lot of networking over here. There are speakers on LinkedIn. Use GoCast and ask a lot of questions, make friends, and also check out the speakers and moderator Andrew, you can take it from here, introduce yourself, the panelists, and start this conversation. And once you're done, invite me back on stage and I'll do some outro notes. All right, I'll see you later.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eduardo. And thank you, all of you out there tuning in. Appreciate all of your attendance. So, I am Andrew Froning, the business, or I should say, director of business development at Ampla. Funny enough, though, today is my first day here. So, this is also a very important conversation for me as well, as I'm looking to go from scaling a team over at JustWorks to now scaling a team from scratch at Ampla. So, I'm looking to learn a lot from my panelists here today. So, starting with David, you want to introduce yourself, tell us what you do and where you're from? David, I think you may be on mute.
I am on mute. Sorry about that. Name's David Ash, Director of Sales Development at the leading sales enablement platform, Lego. And you can see in my picture, I did have long hair, but I sent out a challenge to my team. If they hit a certain number, I would shave my head. And, unfortunately, they hit that number. But excited to be here.
Sean, want to share a little bit about yourself?
For sure. Yeah. What's up, everybody? I did not do that same spiff with my team, even though my head is shaved. It was just a personal decision. But yeah, my name's Sean Titarian, Director of Business Development at Grin. We are a software platform that enables companies to generate authentic relationships with social media influencers and creators. And I'm excited to be here. I was in management, SDR management myself, just a couple years ago, and now in the director's seat, and have gone from being the only manager to now having 13 SDR managers that are on our team and a few directors. So seen the whole kind of scaling of that. So excited to share some experience. And I'm based in Sacramento, California.
And last but not least, and also not to be confused with the amazing enablement tool Gong, we have Sam Gong. You want to share a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I do share my last name with Gong.io, which means I love getting their swag and redistributing it at the Gong family reunions. But Gong.io aside, I'm the VP of New Business Growth here at Zora. We're an enterprise monetization platform. We started out as the company that invented the subscription economy and the tool chain that you need to support that through all of your billing and invoicing needs. And now through acquisition and organic development, have a bunch of tools trying to modernize the way that the CFO does business, particularly at SaaS companies. So excited to be here with other great SDR leaders and talk about how different it is at scale in different places.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introductions, everyone. So to kick things off, looking back at your LinkedIns, which if you all haven't already, make sure click on those links in the chat, connect with these amazing professionals. But looking at your past, you all have had pretty similar experiences, or traditional experiences, to getting to where you are now. But I'm curious, when you found yourself in these new roles, what challenges or objectives were you inheriting by stepping into that role? And really, you'll facilitate the rest of this conversation. So curious, Sam, you were the last one to talk, so we'll start with you. What kind of challenges did you face as you entered your new role?
Yeah, so I think everyone who does leadership for biz dev will at some point in their careers join a new company, and you'll have to take stock of how biz dev is done at your new job, right? And I think of ourselves as like the middle child between sales and marketing and go-to-market planning, in the way you kind of design your go-to-market and your systems and sales process and everything. Biz dev is the glue that ends up filling the gaps between all the other pieces. That's what I've seen in my experience. So when you join a new company, it might be very, very different. When do you hand off pipeline to your sellers? What type of leads or account objects are you being passed by demand gen to work? And so I joined Zora in February. And I think the first quarter really is just spent understanding the way that biz dev is approached and what your team is on the hook for, and from your managers and from your individual contributors, what are the hardest parts of the job, right? Where as a leader can you add value in enablement or tooling or workflow? And I think that's the hardest part of it, is there isn't one playbook that you can apply to any company you join as a leader. You really have to understand the challenges that your biz dev team is meant to be solving within that company's go-to-market, and then where your team is struggling and where they're under-supported, being successful meeting those challenges.
Sean or David, you want to add any additional challenges or objectives you had handled entering your roles?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a kind of a different perspective. My experience was a little different. I didn't come into my company in a new role, like as a director, but I had an experience at a small startup being the first SDR manager there, and then eventually becoming the first director there. So for anybody that's here that maybe is in management and looking to scale up, or just looking at that role altogether, becoming a new director, I think the challenges for me were, number one, taking a step back away from just the day-to-day of the SDR and like what they need just on a day-to-day level, and start looking a little bit further into the future, like being able to actually look ahead 3 months from now and start anticipating what challenges might we run into that we should start talking about now, especially when you know your business is going to be scaling. And that was a big kind of mindset shift from like being more on the front lines to thinking a little bit further out. And then also just managing managers, and realizing that at first, when it's just you, maybe you have 1 or 2 managers that you're working with, it's kind of like, hey, the things that work for me as a manager, I'm going to help you with that. But as you start scaling more and more, that's a hard process to scale, and realizing that actually having some kind of fundamentals for enabling managers started becoming very necessary. So I think we'll maybe touch on that a little bit more here, but those were kind of 2 big things that to think about a little bit, I guess, early and often.
Yeah, and I can piggyback off what Sean said. Thinking as when you're a frontline leader, You're just thinking about the tactical, right? The day-to-day. How do I improve day-to-day? When you move into a director role, you have to look at the big picture. Stop thinking small, start thinking large, right? Looking out 3, 4, 5, 6 months in advance to see, what do I got to do to make sure we get to the point where we need to be at this point. And the other challenge that I faced when I first came into a large organization and not a startup was mapping my different business partners and understanding that relationship. Each business partner has a different dynamic, or you have a different dynamic with them. One's a buyer of what you're selling, and then you become the buyer, and it's that buyer-seller relationship. They're selling to you. So understanding that early will definitely help you out in the long run. And making sure when you are talking with your business partners, you're understanding what they're actually looking for, have them set expectations. And then when you meet with your sellers, setting clear expectations with them so you don't have confrontation down the line.
Great. Thank you for elaborating on all of that. So something I've been picking up through a lot of these summits and webinars is, and just personally as I've seen, is sales development is becoming bigger and bigger of not a nice to have, but almost a need to have to help scale your business. But it's relatively new compared to legacy sales operations. So I'm seeing a lot of teams struggling on how to support the teams, how to support the leaders of those teams. In your roles, did you ever feel properly enabled to handle the challenges that you all just laid out for us? If Sean, you want to start?
Yeah, I think early on, when the team was a lot smaller and we were going through hyper growth scaling, biz dev at the SDR generating pipeline it's a huge, always has been a huge priority, still a huge priority. So thankfully, we weren't having to prove to the business that, hey, you should invest into the SDR team. I think the biggest challenge was what is the best way to invest in the SDR team? And some of the first things that we leaned into was, okay, well, technology. If we can build a best-in-class tech stack for our SDR team, that should really just enable them to be able to go out and execute really well on the job. And that worked to a degree. But one of the big challenges that we ran into was almost having too much technology, where it's you're learning new tools all the time, and you're just trying to figure out as a rep, how do I even keep up with this tech stack and make the best of it? And so it wasn't until going through that challenge that I think we realized as a company that we actually need to invest more in the enablement of the team. And the business invested in an actual business development enablement manager, and then later on we started investing in actual BDR enablement coaches that really took a huge role in the onboarding and training and the tech stack and getting people comfortable with a lot of the best practices. So I think the challenge was thinking that tools and technology were going to be the fix to scale and enable, but it was actually, I think, more impactful investing in the training of our people and the processes and kind of environment that we've created for them.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say Sean hit it on the head, right? You can buy all the greatest tools in the world that will help you find the right people to call, that will put them in a sequence and automate it or automate your dials. But if you're not investing in your people, and that's just not hey, let's set up some one-on-ones and let's set up some role plays, but actually investing in different educational tools to help them learn how to become a better SDR, practice their craft as well, not just practicing with a peer, but practicing on their own time, right? The greatest athletes on this earth, or the most high performing operators on earth, practice on their own. So if you're not buying those tools for them or enabling them with those tools, you're just going to get enough, but you're not going to get what you actually want.
I guess I'll add in my experiences, totally agree with what Sean and David have said. And if you read Topo, if you read Gartner, right, if you need any support making that case within your business, it's more and more common now for companies recognizing exactly what Andrew was saying, right? Like, hey, we know we need SDRs, biz dev teams to be effective. We don't really know how to get there, but it feels like you need some dedicated resources that don't carry quota, whether that's on enablement or operations, right? To make sure that this machine works. And if we scale up the number of SDRs or BDRs, then we're actually getting the productivity that we need from that, right? It's not just about people. It's not about throwing technology at it. You really need to have leaders that can diagnose the problems, understand where things are not working, and then be able to make the case to your business that, hey, you can't just trickle down the enablement that you're giving to sellers. We have a different process. We have different tools and workflow, right? And especially when you have a promotion track and the tenure on your team is not that long, you can't take a year to onboard somebody, right? And so I think making the case as a leader that you need dedicated enablement and support so that people can get up to productivity really, really quickly is crucial. And more companies are realizing that that investment pays back huge dividends. And then the second piece, your question, Andrew. Oh, sorry, David. You'd asked what support we had as leaders too. Would be curious to hear from Sean and David on that. But David, before we change subjects, what were you going to add on the enablement front?
Just the importance of it's not just getting them up to speed, but making sure you continue that education while they're in their seat. One of the things that I found that I hate, and I wish everyone, if you're hearing this and you're building a sales dev team, please don't do this. Do not tell your SDRs they can be an AE within 9 to 12 months. It's just, your failure rate is going to be through the roof. So when they are off ramp and they're fully producing in your eyes, right, they're hitting their number, you shouldn't stop their education. Continue that education, continuing enable them with different sales skills and break out different courses for them. We at Deltec, great company I worked for, had a career progression program, something I brought over to Allego to help with that, to enable your team and giving them different milestones as they are an SDR, and not just you go from an SDR to an AE. You're going to see burnout. You're going to see people jump to other companies. You need to keep continuing enabling them. Similar to like when you're playing a video game, kids play these video games for years and years and years, and it's the same video game, but they're giving them new things in this video game to keep them interested and engaged. So think about that when you're building your SDR org out, that you continue to give them new information, new things to try to keep them excited at doing the mundane job of calling and getting hung up, calling and hanging up.
So, to that second part, what did Allego do for you when you joined to help enable you take on this role as you build out their team?
So I don't want this to be an advertisement, but that's what we do, right? That's our sweet spot. We are a sales enablement company. We provide one of the software I wish I had when I was a young salesperson or a green salesperson. Right, there's different courses I was enrolled in right away. Similar with Deltec, enrolled right away to become a better leader. How to understand the process when I first came over. How to make sure I'm enabling my team on a day-to-day basis. Using our simulator to practice one-on-ones, not just with one-on-ones with my employees, or my team members, I'll call them, but with the higher ups. Right, that can be nerve-wracking coming into an org and having to roll up and have a conversation with a CEO. Right, so having these tools at my ready really enabled me to be the best leader I could be.
Sean or Sam, want to touch on anything that maybe stuck out to you and how you were enabled to find success in your roles?
Yeah, my experience is like slightly different. Just that, again, not coming in to the company brand new in the role, but like kind of growing in with the company. But if maybe your company offers like self-development budgets for you, or if there's that level of support that your company provides in your own education opportunities, like there are so many great groups out there, like a Pavilion, for example, MSP, obviously, Sales Impact Academy, where like if you can take it upon yourself as well to use what resources your company is giving you and perhaps join groups like that. Like there are so many amazing people that I know I've learned from along the way. Like I've had great managers and people above me, who have coached me, but I've learned so much from those communities and actually engaging with those communities and not just being a passive sort of watcher of what happens there. Like, I can't recommend that enough for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think, Andrew, it goes back to the point you made earlier. This is still something that the industry is figuring out, right? Like, very few people, I think, have 15 years of sales development experience at this point. Like, a handful of people in the world would probably say they've been doing this for 15 years. And so the whole industry is learning. And if you limit yourself to only the mentors and people within your company, you're going to be way behind the curve, right? And people do move around. There are a number of companies really at the forefront, I think, of defining what best-in-class biz dev SDR machines look like. And if you aren't spending some time networking with your peers, you're not going to stay up to date just within the walls of your business. So I think within your company, you need to understand the sales culture, the marketing culture, and how your team fits within each of those. But then in terms of technical skills and what's moving, what tech should I be paying attention for the roadmap next year, like, that may not come from anyone at your company. And 100% double down on Pavilion, Modern Sales Pros, these communities of leaders that are focused on this stuff as practitioners day to day.
Certainly. I know we have some questions in the Q&A chat real quick too. I want to get to Michael Moore's question first. And how do we see marketing and sales dev being different or the same? Obviously very closely tied together. David, you talked about getting to know your environment and the buyers and sellers. So curious what your thoughts are on how you see marketing and sales dev either being different, the same, or somewhere in between.
I mean, they definitely work together. I would not say them being the same, right? When I think about marketing, the marketer is the one who goes out on the mountaintops and starts yelling how great our product is and gets people to come into the building so we can start talking to them to qualify them. I think you have to have a great relationship with marketing to help you drive that inbound. But there also has to be some sort of outbound success as well.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Like, partners in crime for sure. Like, separate teams. Hopefully, the KPIs are similar. If your marketing team is trying to help drive pipeline, and that's what your business development team is also trying to do, like, you probably want those goals to be pretty well aligned. But there will be other different KPIs that marketing is going to have versus what your team has. But the more that the leaders can spend time together from those two departments for inbound and for outbound, like, that's what it's all about. There's so many different ways that marketing and biz dev can work together, from like the inbound driving traffic and driving hand raisers to providing air cover for like targeted accounts for your outbound team, to hosting events, to creating content. But having regular syncs with your marketing leaders to share feedback, look at dashboards, how are things performing, and know what each team is working on. Like, the more you can do that together, the more you're going to drive pipeline and get more meetings that way, I think.
And I think in addition to the partnership, there's some nuance depending on the segment of the market you're going after. If you're selling a product to SMBs, to kind of the long tail of companies, you're probably really heavy on that shout from the rooftops marketing motion that David mentioned. You can do effective one-to-many communications. You can do paid media, right? You can reach a broad audience because you've got a broad ICP. And as you move into more enterprise sales and you're focused on a smaller set of known accounts, then the partnership changes a little bit and you've got to do a lot more one-to-one. And a biz dev team is going to be in the account, understand the relationships between the people in the account. And for that enterprise sale, I think you need a different type of partnership with your field marketers, for example, where that joint motion is more account specific. So it's no one size fits all question for that. I think whatever team you're on, you need to understand marketing's perspective and how they're coming across it, and then show up, add value, bring a unique perspective of your own to make it an effective team effort.
Yeah, I would say as the company scales and grows, because we're talking about scaling sales development teams too, if you're a young seed Series A company that's just starting off, maybe you can rely on your reps and your AEs and SDRs to build out that copyright. But as your brand really does get established and you need to make sure you're unified in your messaging, that's where leaning on marketing and all the work they are doing over there is going to be critical, especially as you get to teams of 40, 50, 100 BDRs. You're going to need that unified messaging. And the only way you're really going to get that is to leverage your marketing peers.
Yeah, they become your best friend, right? You want to attach yourself to their hip. And then, you know, the SDRs are in the trenches every day. They're hearing from the prospects. They're hearing from the customers. You got to have a good feedback loop with marketing. And then let the marketers write the content, write the copyright, and allow them to start utilizing if you have a sales engagement platform, to automate some of your outreach for you. And it makes your life a little easier. And the SDRs, you know, will be thankful for that.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about sales or biz dev and marketing is really around the more you can align on ultimately what the goal of each department is. I've seen experiences and challenges in the past where, let's say, marketing's number one goal is just driving the number of demo requests that they can generate for your team, but your team is responsible for qualified pipeline. So it's like if one team is celebrating because, hey, we got 10,000 demo requests, but we're not hitting our pipeline numbers, there might be a little disconnect in there, and trying to find ways to meet more in the middle and focus on the same success metrics, I think will just provide a higher level of impact altogether.
Thank you. So I want to move over to Meg's first question about when do you think the right time to promote an SDR to AE is? I know that Trish Bartuzzi and the Bridge Group comes out with a biannual, right? Twice every other year report on state of sales development. And I think most recently their report found that like if an AE or SDR is promoted to AE within 12 months, there's a 33% or maybe even higher chance that AE is going to fail in their first year. So that's kind of the metrics I use. I know, David, you put in there 15, 18 months. That's why I tell a lot of my reps, but I also feel it can be vary from industry to industry. Like if you're going after SMB versus enterprise, big difference there. And then also at the end of the day, you need to make sure that rep is supported and prepared for that role. And they shouldn't, it's not a race, right? So if their peer got hired after them and promoted before them, yeah, it can sting a little bit, but you need to make sure you're taking that approach where you have that rep's best interest. You want to make sure they're going to be successful when they make that step up. That's my viewpoint, but I'm curious, Sam, David, Sean, where your viewpoints are.
Yeah, I think nope, you can go, Sam. I've talked enough.
I was going to say, I think the first point, right, that it's not about how quickly can we get you into that role, but how long do we need to make you successful in the role? That's the right framing. And so for us at Zora, we sell upmarket, we sell mostly to enterprise customers, and we sell a complex monetization platform that lays across your ERP and your general ledger and your CRM, right? Like it's a hard sale. And typically we involve the CIO's office, the CFO's office, accounting, line of business, right? Like it is an entire complex buying committee at big companies. And so frankly, there isn't a path to go from being the best BDR at our company to a seller that can competently manage one of those deals entirely on their own. So we have to put people through a transition step where you join the inside sales team and you manage cross-sell and you manage upsell, right? And you get a customer-facing experience and account management experience and closing experience, so that little by little, we're building up that skill set that will equip you to one day be successful owning the entire sales cycle for the most complex sales that there are. And so I think it does totally vary depending on the company you're at and who your buyer is and what your product is. And you need to set your sights on, well, is it about becoming an AE as quickly as possible? Is that what my career sights are on? Or is it about learning the most valuable sales skill set that you can and recognizing that the steps are going to be different, but depending on what you're targeting?
Yeah,
that was long.
So Yeah, I mean, to Sam's point, it really depends on, what market you're in. If you're a highly transactional business, then yeah, maybe 12 months, even 9 months would be feasible. But if you're looking at an enterprise sale with a complex sales process with different stakeholders that you need to identify before actually making a sale, and also, with complicated implementations and having to deal with different departments internally, that's hard for someone to navigate and understand if they just join the business within 9 months, right? Because you think about sometimes if you're our complex business, 3 months or even 4 months are spent ramping, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, you're just getting used to being on the phones. Now, if you come in and you hit the ground running and you're crushing your number and you're hitting 150% every time, and you're sitting shotgun with your AEs and asking about sitting on demos and asking what happens after the close, and navigating the business itself and understanding again, your internal stakeholders and understand how they support the sale, then yeah, maybe you go a little quicker. But again, if you're a green person first coming into sales, you're just, and it's not highly transactional, you're going to set yourself up for failure. You become your own worst enemy with that mindset. I need to move quickly.
Yeah, I'll tack on. I feel like we could do a whole panel session just on this kind of topic. It's always a hot button one, but to what both Sam and David have said, like, as a leader of an SDR org, you have an opportunity with your stakeholders at the company to build a developmental path that makes sense for your company and your business needs. And I would say don't try and do it yourself. Like, work with the sales leaders on the actual like account executive side of the house, the head of sales as well, and really learn from them and understand from them what are the skills that are going to be necessary for a BDR to join that team, and make sure that you build in training opportunities and growth opportunities to help your BDRs develop in those skills at the right time, through a promotion path. And actually having like a promotion path on paper really helps for this. Like once an SDR gets to maybe a senior level or a certain level, that they're now they have the opportunity to start spending some of their time to train on some of these AE skills. Like maybe there's an AE readiness program so that they can at least get to a stage where not only are they a top performing BDR in your team, but they actually have developed skills that are necessary for that next role. And that makes the conversation about, when's the right time a lot easier than just trying to only make it about, hey, is it 9 months? Is it 12 months? It's like, you want people to be ready, like everyone here is saying.
Yeah.
And to kind of piggyback off that, when he's talking about that progression program, which is very, very important. It goes back to that enablement piece, giving them things to keep building on their skill set. And don't just look at production, right? You hit 150%, but then you start to dig into the data and you see, it's demo requests, or, I just was emailing and they're not really qualifying. So you have to look at the other things rather than just production to make sure they're going to be able to do the job. And again, don't put them in a seat to fail.
Yeah, and I would say for any SDRs or even you frontline managers out there that have SDRs kind of like asking you all about this, right, is the sooner they're promoted, the sooner they have a quota that they have to start achieving, right? So if they're a high-performing SDR right now, like use that time to really ensure, to David's point, that they're enabled to be successful in that role. That's why I told a lot of my SDRs is, hey, 3 months will fly by, but you can learn a lot more to set yourself up to be that much more successful once you do have that quota. Because once you're an AE, it's a whole different world when you have that quarterly quota, whether it be ARR, members, whatever it is. And Michael, I'll get to some more of your questions, but along this line of progression, right? Since we're talking about scaling out teams, there comes a time to promote people to leadership positions, possibly, right? I need a new manager because I've hired now 20 SDRs. I can't manage all those by myself. I need a manager. do I hire someone externally, or do I promote one of my top performing SDRs? What kind of scale, what does that look like for all of you as you look to build out your teams? Do you promote SDRs, AEs? Sean, I just figured I'd start with you.
I was responding to someone in the chat, so I kind of missed that piece. I'm sorry. If you want to start with anybody else.
Yeah, not a problem.
Right.
David,
I can go. Yeah, so I've promoted SDRs to SDR leaders. And it's not just because they have overall production. You can see when we were in office, but you can also see remotely, are they stepping up as a leader? Do they understand the process? Do they know how to communicate that process to the rest of the team? Again, it's not just about production, it's about understanding how to be a leader and not a manager. So making sure people are, and I think we all get stuck and be like manager, and SDR manager had a very bad connotation to it because it was just, oh, you're a babysitter. But no, we have to look at it as you're a leader. So, you lead by example, you make sure people are buying into the process. And can that person hold someone accountable? Were they able to be held accountable, or were they a lone wolf? I've never promoted a lone wolf, even though they're my top producers, because of that. I'm scared they're going to teach other people to be lone wolves as well.
Yeah. So I think I've seen managers come in from 3 other sources, right? You can be promoted up from BDR, and at that point, you're going to have to teach them management, right? They know the product, they know the sales motion within the company, and you investing in them is teaching them how to be a leader, teaching them how to manage quota across a whole team of people, the basic HR mechanics, when you have to put people on performance plans, all of that stuff. We've also brought in managers who've been professional BDR managers at other companies, right? They're typically very, very good at all that HR stuff, but they're not going to be credible with their team. They're going to have a really hard time being that coach and helping people find success unless you've got a really, really good plan to get them up to speed on the product very, very quickly. And then the last bucket that I've seen be successful is a lot of times you have AEs that know the product, know the full sales cycle really, really well, and they decide they want to get into management. And it's tough to take an AE manager position immediately, but you can take a biz dev management position. And then you're coming in with the advantage of you've been the customer, right? You know the product, you know the sales cycle, you know what a good handoff looks like. And so you can come in and really be a good driver of quality in the biz dev team, and be that great coach that shows people how to drive effective meetings, drive effective qualification. I've seen any of those 3 work. You just have to know what the strong suit and weak suit with each of those profiles is to make them an effective manager on your team.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's nice if you're scaling and you're going to have more than just 1 or 2 managers, to have a healthy balance of bringing in some folks from the outside who know what it is to be in a management seat and navigate through that, and just how to be an effective people leader, and then having some folks on the team that developed from within, whether they were BDRs or AEs or something else. And I think that creates like a really well-balanced management team that can really collaborate well and learn from each other. And I think those reps that you have on their team that are the folks that are going out of their way to help other people. They are not afraid to speak up the right way and share their experience and mentor others. And it's nice to start. You can have conversations with those reps about, hey, have you ever thought about being in a management or coaching position for, like, you have some natural skills that I'm seeing there, and give them opportunities to test the waters from time to time, perhaps get them enrolled in like a frontline leadership coaching course, and let them feel what it might be like. And if they're really bought in and y'all are bought in, and there's that need there, I've seen that work really well for somebody who's never been an actual manager before to do really well in that role.
Yeah, I utilized a role, we called it a team lead for us, where I actually gave one of my top performing SDRs who wanted to get into management, I gave him 2 direct reports. For all intents and purposes, he was their manager, but he still retained a quota, reported to me along with the rest of the team. And I was able to cultivate that leadership, and he was able to decide whether or not leadership was for him, or he could have also gone to that closing full cycle AE route in this case, he went full-fledged management and ended up being our top performing manager, because he had that guide into that leadership position that really like gave him the confidence to take on such a role. So I want to hit on one of Michael's questions that I think a lot of people will want to hear our responses to is, what is a misstep you have made while scaling an SDR team that we all, the audience, can learn from? I know I've made a few in my day. I'm sure all of us have, right? So, David, want to kick us off there?
Yeah, I would say it's, I've made a lot of mistakes, right? I'm not perfect. But I would say, one of them, going back to the start of the pandemic when the SDR position was in high demand and we started hiring scared, right? That's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make is hiring scared, or not having a good hiring process in place when you're interviewing. I think it's either Dave Delaney or Jeremy Donovan's book on sales development talks about having a scorecard for your interviews, and get away from that old school approach. And if Matt Canada, my old HR person's on right now, is probably laughing, but you got to get away from that old school approach of one-on-one interviews. Moving to a panel interview is the most efficient way to interview now, especially in the remote world. And having that scorecard with different characteristics that you look for in a successful SDR, and asking those specific questions that line up with those characteristics, and having everyone score that person during the panel interview, and then getting together and debriefing after has been very successful for the organization I was with before Lego, and it's been definitely helping us scale out of Lego right now.
I definitely agree with the comment on hiring standards and hiring process, right? I think every effective FLM has figured out how to recognize good talent and bring them in. And as you scale up and you get further and further from the individual heads, you get lost in spreadsheet land, right? Like the plan for next year is a spreadsheet, and at some point that translates into real people. This is totally a people-driven business. And if you bring in the strongest people you can, every calorie you spend on enablement and training and management just goes way, way further. So I love that lesson. Definitely share, like, if you hire quickly, it's easy to compromise on stuff, and you pay for those for months. The other point I'll call out is different products and different sales cycles and different market segments, right? Mean the job is different in different places. And the mistake that I'm always making is, oh, well, I've seen this before. I know how to solve this problem, without recognizing the differences in the go-to-market at the new company or new products that my team is building pipeline for. And so just the nuance and understanding how that impacts the daily metrics, weekly metrics, amount of personalization your team needs to do. Like, you really need to do a lot of listening to understand what role biz dev occupies for that product and market before you start trying a solution. And I'm always anxious to jump into solutions. Like, listen more is the lesson I'm always relearning.
Cool. I think for me, scaling, when it comes to scaling the biz dev team, one of the biggest mistakes, or just really lessons that I had to learn the hard way along the way, was that what got you there yesterday won't naturally just always be the thing that gets you where you're going tomorrow. And for me, one example of that was, touched on it earlier, if you're onboarding one SDR manager, or maybe one or two, I used to just lean into, hey, let me just take you under my wing. We'll figure this out together. Don't worry about not having a super built out 30, 60, 90 plan. We're going to work closely together, and I'll help you get ramped up. And that works when you're talking just maybe one or two people. But when you're starting to bring on teams of people at a time, having a framework or a structure of what is it that you want your, what do you want your leaders, what management style are you really creating within your company? And that you don't have to just do everything yourself internally. It's great to lean on third parties to help you train up and build that kind of leadership framework that you have. And that's something that has been a game changer for us at Grin, is every manager that comes on goes through the same frontline sales manager boot camp. We leverage a closed loop kind of coaching framework about how to handle coaching conversations with your reps. So having that like be repeatable and scalable, I don't know if we could have scaled at the way that we're at right now if we had just tried to do everything like flying by the seat of our pants, just internally like that.
And I would say, kind of piggybacking off that of like enabling your frontline managers, is a lot of times a mistake I had made was that I'd get so invested in how their teams were doing, trying to coach them on how to coach their reps and focusing on those ICs, that I didn't spend enough time developing that manager. That manager still needs support. That manager is your direct report that needs just as much as attention as if they were an IC, right? You're developing their leadership skills, and I would say that can very easily be something that's forgotten about as you develop a team, and all of a sudden you have 7 managers reporting you, all reporting to about the 60 SDRs you have. That can sometimes get lost, and they're the ones you really need to be developing because it trickles down.
That's a great point, Andrew. If you think about it, we lean in our frontline leaders to coach their SDRs, and using a Lego, a Gong, a Sales Loft, whatever is recording your calls that you can coach on. But we don't do that, or most don't do that for their leaders, right? Are you listening? Or are there recorded one-on-ones they have with their direct reports that you can go in there and give them coaching on how to handle different conversations? Are you listening to calls with your frontline leaders at the same time to help understand how to coach properly? Someone coming up from an individual contributor moving into a leadership role, they don't know how to coach. So how are they learning to coach? Is it just coaching on the fly, like this is what I would do? Or is it getting in a room together and all, coach the coach session where you all listen to a call to make sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to coaching?
Yeah. So I think great question that just came in right line with coaching, right? Is do you approach coaching, firing, or pipping differently for these groups? SDRs that are inconsistent but gritty, and SDRs that are consistent but slacker.
So it's will versus skill?
Yeah. I would say
they're definitely different, right?
Yeah, my approach is, look, you need to know your reps. You need to know your manager. You need to know their learning style. And you need to find what works for them. That's what makes this job challenging, right? Not everyone can be a leader and can be a manager, but the managers who can really identify how to bring out the performance of their reps, whether it's will or skill, like you need to identify that and build plans around that.
Yeah, I think there's a good book out there by Corey Bray and Hilman Sari. It's called The Coach Model. Before even putting someone on a PIP, I love the coach, but I've added an extra O to it for outcome rather than opportunity and outcome instead of what is it? Forget what the A is. What's the A, Sean?
I think is it accountability?
No.
I can't remember now. That's not.
Oh, yeah. No, action. So it's, So using something like that before they get on a PIP to create a plan to make sure they can, if you see improvement, or they just move straight to that PIP. So putting things in place before moving to a PIP will definitely be an easier way to either let them go or manage up, manage out, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
If the question is between the person that finds a way to deliver their pipeline number without hitting their activity metrics, or the person that's always all over their activity metrics but somehow short on pipeline, I keep the person that hits their pipeline metrics, right? That's the one that actually moves the needle for the business. That's the one that, if you've designed your sales process correctly, is impossible to fake, right? There's validation from your prospects that there's actually demand and business moving through that person's seat. And then, like David said, PIP should be your last resort for either of these. And a PIP isn't just a failing of that individual. if you look upstream, was there something that went wrong in sourcing that person in the interview process? Should you have been able to like recognize this wasn't going to be a fit way earlier? Because if you have to manage someone out for performance, like there's a huge lost investment there and you're back to square one. So like, yeah, it's a tool. You need to use it when you need to use it. And I'd say, hitting your activity metrics doesn't protect you from a PIP. But there should be plenty of tools at that manager's disposal to recognize that things aren't going right way earlier, and hopefully get that person the help they need so that their activities are being effective. So you don't have to make this choice too often.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's like both of those examples are coaching opportunities. Hopefully you can observe those trends early and often before you would get to the point where you're like, wow, like I'm getting fed up. Like we got to do something about this. And thinking about, is it a skill set issue? Is it a mindset issue, which, comes from that coaching framework where, the rep that's hitting their quota regularly, but they're not reaching their KPIs. There might be a motivational issue there of, what's really driving them to perform, and what could their what kind of quota attainment could they have, if they ramped up those certain areas, and there's probably just a motivational issue there. So and then really just setting up the expectations, when you bring somebody on, of like, hey, hitting quota is obviously priority number one here, but this is also what success looks like. Success looks like, achieving your KPIs. It's being gritty. It's being present in the role and participating, like, the kind of the core values, and just setting that tone with your team, if that's what you want, that both of those things or all of those things are measures of success, so that it's not a surprise, to somebody as well down the road. They're like, well, hey, I've been hitting quota for 9 months. Like, why do you care about, how engaged and gritty I am? So food for thought.
Yeah, I would say, why having a slacker that achieves goal could be a problem. Well, you could have attrition, right? If someone's hitting goal, but they're slacker and they're not engaged with you, then you're going to have to go find someone who can replace that person who keeps consistently hitting goal. So I think when you have someone who's hitting goal and they're slacker, it just may, to Sean's point, well, how else can we enable them? How else can we keep them engaged? Can we give them more responsibility? Do they want to participate in coaching? Do they want to participate in onboarding? It just might be something, they're getting bored in what they're doing. They can hit their goals sleeping, but what else can you do to keep them engaged, to keep them on the team?
Great. Now, Grant, we only have 5 minutes left before I have to hand it back to Eduardo, but I'm going to try, because this is another one, as Sean's pointed out, a few of these topics can be a whole nother segment. The remote SDR, right? It's obviously coming more and more a thing as we entered the pandemic, because we had to, and then as we're coming out in this new working environment. And as you scale, even if maybe you're opening up a new office and have to hire a team out there, right? At some point, you may have to manage a team, an individual or a team that's not physically with you in office. What considerations do you need to make for that?
What do you mean considerations?
And how's coaching going to be different? Are there expectations going to be different because someone's in a remote environment making all this work by themselves? Like, is ramp different?
Yeah, I can share. Oh, you gonna go, David?
I was just going to say, to Sean's point, it's setting expectations early and often, right? And having checkpoints throughout the week. None of those bi-weekly one-on-ones. It's one-on-ones every week. It's team stand-ups every day. How can you keep them engaged if you have a Slack or whatever the other chat things are? How are you coaching? Make sure if you're running a sales dev org, you have something that records your calls, that allows your people to practice, that allows you to have insight on what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And the biggest thing is making sure you're celebrating little wins. and finding time to get together with the team. If that's celebrating last month or celebrating some sort of social event, that's the people that we're hiring now. They love that stuff. They want to be engaged.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And making sure that your success metrics and success factors are more visible, since you're not able to just rely on hearing and seeing everybody in the office. You really have to have the right reports, and have the right data at your fingertips to be able to kind of understand what a rep is doing and where their strengths and weaknesses are, from a virtual standpoint. And then just, attending calls, listening into calls. I mean, the more that you can leverage, tools like Gong, for example, to be able to just know what folks are doing remotely. I feel like the tools are there, and it's up to us to make sure that we're putting ourselves in a position to be able to understand how people are working, and where we might be able to come in for coaching opportunities.
So just putting this directly, I haven't worked on a team yet, a biz dev team yet, where being in person together wasn't an advantage in some way, some of the time. And I think that's tough because everyone wants to work remote. No one wants to commute, right? And so you've really got to balance the needs of the team, and you don't want to waste anyone's time driving 2 hours each way to get to work just for the sake of it. But I think when you're ramping, when you're trying to coach people on any changes in your go-to-market, right? You get there faster as a group when you've got that side by side, look over the person's shoulder next to you and figure out what they're doing. Even with teams that work in the office 1 or 2 days a week, there's so many little workflow things that people who've ramped independently come in and they look at the way someone's using Sales Navigator, like, oh man, I never knew you could do that. And so I think there's an arms race, and I can imagine a company that's totally got their stuff together and is able to build equally effective remote onboarding packages, but they've got to be so thorough to catch every little thing that otherwise you learn just by watching the person next to you or getting in-person coaching from your manager. So I love remote work, right? We do it 4 days a week, but we make that in-office day as valuable as you can, because there's just so many things that are hard to keep from falling through the cracks when you never spend any time watching the way someone else does the job.
All right.
I would say to Sam's point is
I unfortunately have to cut everyone off here. We do have to wrap things up because Eduardo needs a few minutes to come in, say some closing remarks. There's a lot of good conversation. Definitely connect with these individuals, connect with me. I saw some additional questions that we weren't able to get to. Doesn't mean we can't get to them one-on-one. Reach out to us.
Awesome. Sorry, guys, to cut you off. The conversation was being amazing, but we have another amazing panel coming up, so I do need to stop the conversation for right now. Thank you guys so much. Andrew, you are an amazing moderator. Thank you, Sean, Sam, and David. You are amazing speakers. Thank you for your time and for being with us here today. And audience, you are the best. Those questions were fantastic. Please, I put the links for their LinkedIns, for the speakers' LinkedIns on the chat, so you can connect with them. You can also click on their names, and it will bring you to their profile here. Thank you for the questions. Any questions there we didn't get to answer, we will answer in the follow-up email. And this event was recorded. The recording will be available in the MSP page later today. The panelists and I will hang out backstage, and the MSP team will make sure that everything is on the page for you later today. And stick around for our next panel, Selling the New, Sales Leadership for Emerging Categories. That's going to be an amazing conversation. Panelists, we can go backstage.